Max Q Productions presents Calling All Stations, a novel, written and narrated by Gilles Messier. Chapter 8. The First Mate. Days passed, or weeks, or months. Time had no meaning in my windowless cell. And when all the songs had been sung, all the flags and capitals named, when every corner of my mind had been thoroughly scoured, I found myself truly alone. In desperation, I continued to bang out Morse code on the ship's hull. It was a fool's errand, but a fool's hope is better than none at all. I carried on long after my legs had begun to ache, gritting my teeth to the pain, for I dared not stop, dared not surrender to the silent void. Until one day, when suddenly, I heard someone tapping back. At first I thought I'd imagined it, like those phantom flashes of light one sees in pitch darkness. Or perhaps it was just some machinery rattling in the engine room. But like a foreigner hearing his mother tongue in a crowded room, a spark of recognition flashed in my mind. Pressing my ear to a nearby steam pipe, I heard the unmistakable patter of Morse code. D-E-Z-M-O-I-A-I-D-E-Z. Aidez-moi. Help me. A bolt of electricity flashed up my spine, jolting the dusty gears of my mind into motion. Was there someone else like me aboard? Another prisoner? How many of us were there? Though I had been made to crawl into every dank nook and cranny in the ship, I was forbidden from entering the hold. There could be dozens of us down here, a whole cargo of slaves, bound for some oriental bazaar, our labor used en route as one might dip into a shipment of rum. Who were they, and where had they come from? And if we could signal to one another, could we not unite, plot a mutiny like the crew of the Bounty against cruel Captain Bligh? All these thoughts and 1,000 more cascaded through my head in a great torrent. Qui est là? I signaled back. Who is there? Several minutes passed before a reply came ringing down the pipe. His fist was sloppy and haphazard, much as Marcel's had been, and it took a few repetitions for me to decipher the message. Il fait noir. It is dark. Pourquoi? Why? Attaché. Attached. Thinking I had misheard, I closed my eyes and concentrated as the frantic tapping continued. Attaché. Attaché. Aidez-moi. Attached. Perhaps I realized he meant tied up, that he had been bound. Qui êtes-vous? I asked. Who are you? Je suis Ed. But before I could finish, a metallic squeal burst in my ear as the door swung open, revealing the wiry frame of the scarred man. Once again, we fell into the dance we'd performed 1,000 times before, and with the rope secure around my waist and the pistol barrel jammed into my back, I was led off to yet another thankless task. But rather than aft to the engine room or some other dark corner of the ship, this time we headed upwards, towards the main deck. I managed a weak smile, for today I would see the sun. And when at last I saw that pale light beckoning through the companionway above, I quickened my pace and climbed up to meet it. I emerged into a white void. Turning in place, I could see nothing at all in every direction, not even my feet beneath me. So total was the emptiness that for a moment I wondered if I was dead, and the scarred man, the angel of death, come to escort me to the hereafter. Then, feeling the damp salt air on my skin, I realized we had merely drifted into a thick fog. As I stepped forward, the shapes of men materialized from the haze, 24 at least lined up along the gunwales, gazing out into the gloom. The engine barely murmured beneath the deck. Richelieu was groping its way along at quarter speed, every eye and ear bent into the fog. The scarred man led me forward to the wheelhouse, where he shoved me through a hatchway and slammed it shut behind me. I smelled the room before I saw it. The air was thick with a musty stench, a mixture of tobacco, old sweat, and stale beer. It was a cramped room, only large enough for a small table and a bed built into the wall. Empty bottles and stubbed-out cigarettes lay strewn all about, and a mound of dirty clothes spilled from the table onto the bed. Glancing about, I saw nothing broken, no rust or leaks, nothing to repair. But then I turned around and gasped. Lining the wall were 3 tall black metal cabinets covered in lights, gauges, and dials. On the wooden desk before them lay a pair of headphones, a Morse key, and a pedestal microphone. It was a wireless, far larger and more sophisticated than Father's old Marconi back on Bell Rock. Awestruck, I approached the machine and ran my finger across the dials, felt the satisfying click of the Morse key, wrapped my hand around the sleek microphone. This is brand new territory. No arcane dots and dashes to be divined like tea leaves, but real voices. The very souls of men carried over the airwaves. It called to me, sweet and sultry as a siren's song. But the constellation of lights and gauges was dark, the headphones silent. A panel had been removed, exposing the machine's tangled innards, and a clutter of wires, valves, tools, and manuals lay strewn across the desk. My heart fluttering with excitement, I pounced upon this new task like a desert wanderer upon an oasis. Amid the clutter, I found a schematic, whose tangled lines I carefully traced with my finger. Though I was considerably out of practice, before long I managed to return every condenser, resistor, and valve to its rightful place. When the power was restored, the lights and gauges all hummed and glowed to life, but an empty silence crackled over the headphones. I puzzled over this for some time, leafing through manuals, checking every connection, and adjusting every knob, switch, and dial. Then at last the eureka moment came. I'd replaced the valves in the wrong order. The moment I corrected this error, the low hum of a carrier signal came trickling through the headphones, the sweetest sound I had heard in a long while. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard that muffled groan behind me. Whirling around, I saw what I'd taken to be a pile of laundry began to heave and lurch. A pair of drooping, bloodshot eyes appeared amid the mass of threadbare cloth, followed by a great beak-like nose and a broad head covered in rough black stubble, like a dirty old bottle brush in dire need of cleaning. The man's eyes flitted about in confusion until at last they met mine, and suddenly they narrowed to slits. In a flash he pulled out a knife and lunged at me, but he was stopped short by the table, the blade barely grazing my cheek as I leapt back. "Qui êtes-vous?" he growled, drunkenly waving the knife about. Struck dumb, I pressed myself against the wall. "Qui êtes-vous?" As the man began to skirt around the table, I managed to force out a few words. Edward. Edward qui? Edward Hawkins, I stammered. J'ai venu pour réparer la radio. Assez, the man winced. Ils m'ont envoyé ici pour... Assez, enough, he roared. I fell silent. Putain, he groaned, rubbing his temples. Where did you learn your French? Well, he snapped after a moment's silence. From books, I said. From books, he chuckled as he slowly sank back into his seat. Then, without warning, he broke into a violent fit of coughing. As he hacked and wheezed, his face turning blood red, I thought of old Billy Bones breathing his last on the floor of the Benbow Inn. But he managed to draw enough breath to gasp out a single word. "Bouteille," he said, clawing desperately at the air. "Bouteille." Glancing about, I found a shelf behind me lined with dark green bottles, and quickly handed him one. Still coughing and gasping, he hacked at the neck with his knife until at last it snapped off, then downed the contents in one long draught. Almost immediately, the fit seemed to subside. "So, Edward," he panted, "what you do here?" They brought me up from I said, well, to fix the radio. "Ah," he said, "you are the, passager clandestin, how you say, stowaway?" "Oui, stowaway." But his flash of joviality suddenly evaporated, his eyes narrowing once more. "Why you come aboard our ship?" he hissed, his hands searching for the knife. A chill ran down my spine. I'd seen father like this before. There could be no reasoning with him. Whatever I said or did, he'd run me through all the same. I pressed myself flatter against the wall and began inching towards the door. But the moment his hand wrapped around the knife handle, he suddenly froze, cocking his head in confusion. In that brief moment of silence, I heard the static crackling through the headphones give way to clear strings of Morse code. "You do that?" said the man, gesturing to the radio. I nodded. He grunted, slumping back into his seat. "Edward Hawkins. Jacques Monod, premier officier, first mate, I think you say." He did not extend his hand, nor would I have shaken it if he had. Instead, he poured the last dregs of the bottle into a tin cup and pushed it towards me. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down and took the cup with a gracious nod. "So, Edward," said Jacques, "you can repair radios, eh? How you get here?" "It's a long story," I mumbled. "Bon," said Jacques, taking another bottle down from the shelf. "I like long stories." Jacques listened intently as I told my story, rolling cigarette after cigarette until a layer of acrid blue haze hung over the room. When at last I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his face expressionless. But then I heard it, a strange rumbling from deep within his chest, faint at first but steadily rising until he broke once more into a fit of coughing. I reached the shelf for another bottle before I finally realized. He was laughing. His chest heaved in great hearty guffaws as he slapped the table, sending bottles and glasses crashing to the floor. Meanwhile, my face flushed as red as his. "It's just what I've always said," he said. "It is possible to be a genius and an idiot at the same time. You really fell for this, yes? You really are a silly little boy. Stéphane!" he bellowed at the door. There was no answer. "Please no," I pleaded. "Don't send me back down there. I can join the crew, please. I know my way around the ship. I'd be really useful. I'd pull my weight, truly." "Join the crew?" Jacques scoffed. "No, you won't last a minute out there. Not where we go. Stéphane!" When again he received no answer, Jacques grumbled, rose, and staggered over to the door, only to find the scarred man missing. Through the open doorway I heard the ship's bell tolling. "Il est déjà descendu," Jacques muttered to himself. "You, come with me," he said, snatching the knife from the table. "And don't try anything, yes?" I hung my head and shuffled along behind him, now well and truly defeated. It didn't matter what I said or did. A slave I was, and a slave I would remain. Jacques led me below to the mess, where the crew sat around a long wooden table, drinking, smoking, playing cards, and fighting. The moment I entered, the room went deathly quiet, and 4 eyes turned towards me. "Ce qu'il fait ici," one growled. "Celui tu dois demander," Jacques shot back, pointing to the scarred man. "C'est sa responsabilité." "Si c'était de moi, je l'aurais poignardé et lancé au requin, ça fait des semaines," said the scarred man, that pale, dead eye glaring right at me. "Moi aussi," said Jacques. "Mais putain, il est utile comme petit esclave. Il a même réparé la radio." "Enlève-le d'ici," said the scarred man. "Placard 5. Après, said Jacques, waving his hand dismissively. He ladled out some stew from a cauldron on the table and thrust the bowl into my hands. "Go to the back," he said, "and keep quiet, understand?" I nodded and scurried to the corner, running the gauntlet of murderous eyes. There I sat, nervously picking at my stew as I watched and listened. At first I caught only brief snatches, a word here, a sentence there, but the longer I listened, the clearer the pirate's strange argot became, and from the growling babble a heated argument emerged. "So the radio is fixed?" said the bearded giant. "Why aren't we moving?" "Don't worry about it," said Jacques. "What?" the scarred man exclaimed. "The captain is waiting for a position." "I said don't worry about it," said Jacques. "Every ship on this route has hit the fog. We'll lose a few hours. And then?" "You think Captain Barre is going to care?" another crewman interjected. "Every hour we're late he'll cut the price. By the time we get there, the cargo will be worthless." Jacques shrugged and downed his drink. "The captain doesn't pay me to work during dinner." "I wonder what the captain does pay you for," the scarred man sneered, "other than to drink up our wine supply." "Oh, wouldn't you like to know?" said Jacques. "Oh, I would," said the scarred man, leaning low over the table like an animal about to pounce. "You're the one who got us into this mess, who decided to send Pierre down there. The hell were you thinking? You know... Who else is going to fit in there?" Jacques snapped. "You? Ivan? And anyway, it's good for him. Maybe soon he'll snap out of it, stop being such a child." The scarred man lunged, hands flying for Jacques' throat. But Jacques easily dodged him, and in one swift, brutal motion locked his head in the crook of his arm. "You know, Steph," said Jacques, grinning menacingly as he drew his knife, "that's a bad look on you. Why don't I even up that face of yours?" The room seemed to hold its breath as Jacques held the blade a hair's breadth from the scarred man's good eye, wide and quivering with terror. But after a long, dreadful moment, the scarred man shook his head in surrender, and Jacques released him. "You call yourself soldier," Jacques muttered as the scarred man scrambled back to his seat. I wanted to vault over the table, to bolt back to my cell, jump overboard, anything to get away from this den of killers, but my path was blocked as the oil-soaked machinist suddenly appeared in the doorway. As he sat down beside me, I saw how truly filthy he was. The oil seemed to saturate every nook and cranny of his body, so that not 1 inch of bare skin showed through. I don't know what I was thinking, reaching out to feel his skin like that, but the moment my finger touched him, his powerful hand shot to my throat and slammed me up against the wall. I kicked and flailed helplessly as I hung in midair, those bulging ivory eyes burning mere inches from my face, those broad nostrils flaring with rage like a horse. "Enough, Thierry," someone called, but he ignored them. "The hell are you doing?" he hissed at me. I could only gasp for air as his hand continued to tighten around my throat. "Relax, Terry," said Jacques. "He's probably never seen un egg before." "Lucky kid," someone said. The crew burst into laughter. At this, the machinist grunted and released his grip, and I crumpled to the floor, coughing and sputtering. "What's going on in here?" a voice boomed, and as one, the crew rose and snapped to attention. From beneath the table, I saw a pair of tall black boots stride into view. "Well?" the captain snapped. "The kid's causing trouble," said the scarred man. "Wino didn't put him back in his cell." "If I recall," said the captain, "that was supposed to be your responsibility." But before the scarred man could reply, the captain turned and barked across the room. "You, boy, get up!" Though still winded, I jumped to my feet and stood ramrod straight before the captain. "What are we going to do with him, Captain?" said the scarred man. "I saw you throw him overboard and be done with it." "Captain, he's useful to have around," the bearded giant countered. "Always does his work, and Wino says he even fixed the radio." "What?" said the captain, turning to Jacques. "Why haven't you plotted a course yet?" Jacques shrugged. "I was hungry." The captain, quivering with rage, made to speak, but relented and merely shook his head. "Just get it done," he grunted. "Captain," said the scarred man, "we still haven't decided what to do with him. I say we put it to a vote." The crew nodded in agreement. "Is it true?" said the captain, turning to Jacques. "He fixed the radio?" "Yes," said Jacques, "but it's nothing I couldn't have done." "Nothing you couldn't have done sober," someone sneered. "Quiet!" barked the captain. The crew fell silent. "So," the captain muttered, glancing down at me, "what to do with you?" I trembled uncontrollably, my foot tapping out a rapid tattoo on the table leg as I awaited the captain's judgment. While the crew shouted out their solutions to this troublesome little stowaway, my eyes landed on Jacques, over whose face a curious expression had fallen. He stared at me for a long moment, head cocked, a scheming smirk playing on his lips. "I've said it before, and I'll say it again," said the scarred man. "Let's just throw him overboard." "Enough, Doré," snapped the captain. "If you were careless enough to let a boy take out your eye, you got what you deserved. We've all done enough killing for one lifetime anyway. No, we drop him off at Gibraltar. He's English, they can take care of him. Now get him back to his cell and get back to work." "Actually, Captain," said Jacques as the captain turned to leave, "he can stay in my cabin." "What?" "I may have some use for him when we reach Ceuta," said Jacques. "He can eat from my rations." The captain raised a skeptical eyebrow. "All right," he said after a moment, "but the moment he steps out of line, we drop him off ashore. Understood?" With that, the captain turned on his heel and marched away. "Viens," said Jacques. Bewildered, I followed him back to the radio room. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the bed, "and be quiet. Not a word, understood?" I obeyed, sitting silently as Jacques switched on the radio. It was agony, watching him scan through the frequencies. His movements were clumsy, his Morse halting and amateurish. An age passed before he finally turned to the brass speaking tube on the wall. "Position 37 north, 10 west, 32 nautical miles west of Chagres," he reported. "Understood," came the tinny reply. Jacques rose and reached the shelf, pulling out a deck of cards. "Where did you learn," he said, "to do Morse like that?" "Like what?" "Like that," he said, pointing to the floor. "I can feel you through the table. You tap out your thoughts." Glancing down, to my astonishment, I saw my trembling leg tapping out a steady stream of dots and dashes, telegraphing my thoughts just as one talks in one's sleep. But before I could answer, Jacques slipped the deck from its box and began shuffling it in his meaty hands. "You know piquet?" he said. "No." "Faro? Bouillotte? Ambigu?" I shook my head. "What games do you know?" I don't know any," I admitted. Jacques grunted in frustration and pulled a card from the deck. "You know this?" "Queen of spades?" "Non, dame de pique. Look," he said, holding up the 4 suits in sequence. "Trèfle, carreau, pique, carreau." "Repeat it." "Trèfle, carreau, pique, carreau. Roi, dame, valet, as. Roi, dame, valet, as." Jacques grimaced and pulled a sheet of paper from the radio bench on which he spelled out all the words. "Memorize it," he said, thrusting it into my hands. "But do it now." My eyes flitted across the page, struggling to read in the dim light. "Time's up," said Jacques, snatching the paper away. He then sat down across the table with his back to me and his foot pressed up against the table leg. "What do I have?" he said, holding up a handful of cards. Set de trèfle, valet de carreau." "No," said Jacques. "Tap it out." Obediently, I kicked at the table leg. "Set de trèfle." "Quiet, so I can just feel it." C'est de très valet. Faster! C'est de très valet. I said faster. Why are you... Jacques dealt a fresh hand. Start again, he grunted. Damn... cow... Faster, Jacques barked. I need the whole hand in 15 seconds. But do it! But I could not signal any faster. Already my toe was sore from the kicking, and my nervous trembling was ruining my letters. In desperation, I resorted to abbreviations. DCO, 10T, AT, 8P. Faster! I can't. Jacques spun around, eyes aflame. The pendulum had swung back. Let me be clear, he growled. I am the only one keeping you aboard this ship. If you cannot do this, you have no use to me. The captain will drop you ashore next chance he gets. Understand? I swallowed nervously and nodded. Bon, said Jacques, turning his back again. Do it again. He held up a fresh hand, and I set upon the table length as fast as I could. 6CA, AP, RP, 9D, 10CO, 8T. Good, he said, and held up another hand. Then another, and another. Finally he lowered the hand and slowly nodded. Then, without another word, he rose and pulled his oilskins from a peg by the door. I go on watch now, he said. You can sleep here. Do not go out without me, understand? I nodded. Welcome aboard, said Jacques. And then he was gone. I sat still for a long, stunned moment, my mind reeling. In the span of an hour, I had gone from being a slave to nearly being stabbed, strangled, and thrown overboard to now, somehow, becoming a member of the crew. I felt like a seabird tossed about in a gale, seeking only some sheltered place to land. In this respect, the prospect of a warm bed proved too tempting to resist, and despite the chaos brewing in my head, within moments of crawling between the sheets, I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep.